Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Teacher Samuel, and today we have a very exciting substitution word problem question. Now, this kind of question is very common in the Primary 4 SASMO exam. So without further ado, let's take a look at our question today. Ronald McDonald, the farmer, has chickens, goats, and cows in his farm. He has 40 chickens and goats combined. He notices that 3 times the number of his chickens is 5 times the number of his cows. On the other hand, 2 times the number of goats is 10 times the number of his cows. Help Ronald McDonald determine the total number of animal feet in his farm. Now, when you look at this question, you might be thinking to yourself, wow, I'm so stressed. There's so many kinds of animals, 3 kinds of animals. And what's more, we have so many different multiples. How am I going to solve this? But not to worry, I'll take you through this problem step by step. So let's look at what the problem is asking. We are asked to determine the total number of animal feet in this farm. Now, if we want to determine that, what do we need to calculate first? That's right, we need to calculate the quantities of each animal first. Now, can we do that directly with the information in the question? No, but not to worry. What information can we get from the question? We see that 40 chickens and goats there are combined. So, from this, what can we determine or calculate? That's right. We can assume units for some of these animals. So, let's take a look at what information else we have in the question. We see that 3 times the number of his chickens is 5 times the number of his cows. And how would we express this as an equation? It would be chicken times 3 equals cow times 5. Now, which animal should we start to consider first? Actually, we can choose either animal. But in this video today, I'll just stick with choosing chicken first. Now, I want to ask a very, very important question. If we want to set the number of chickens as a unit value, can we set the number of chickens as 1 unit? Now, if you said no, then you're absolutely correct. And why can we not set the number of chickens as 1 unit? Because then we won't get a whole number for the number of cows as a unit. And it will be very difficult for us to calculate. So, if we don't set the number of chickens as 1 unit, then what do we set the number of chickens as? If you said 5, then you're very, very correct. That's great. How do you know that we should set the number of chickens as 5 units? It would be the opposite number. So, the number on the other side of the equal sign is the number we use to assume the units for the number of chickens. So, we would assume now that the number of chickens is 5 units. And with that assumption, can we now calculate the number of cows in terms of units? Yes, we can. We just take the number of chickens in terms of units, and because 3 times the number of his chickens is 5 times the number of his cows, we would take 5 units times 3 divided by 5. And it would be how many units? 3 units for the number of cows. Now, can we also calculate the number of goats in terms of units? Yes, we can. We see that 2 times the number of goats is 10 times the number of his cows. So, how do we calculate this? Well, we would take the number of cows in terms of units, which is 3 units, multiply by 10, and divide by 2. And so how many units is the number of goats? It would be 15 units. Now that we have calculated the units for each of these quantities, let's move this up to the upper left of the screen so that we can calculate the quantity for each animal. So, here we have the information at the top left. Now, how would we calculate the quantity for each of these animals? Do you remember that very important piece of information we got in the question? That's right, we knew from the question that the number of chickens and goats combined is 40. Now, how do we calculate the quantity of each of these animals now? That's right, we can add up the number of chickens and goats in terms of units, which would be 5 units plus 15 units. And so how many units is that? It would be 20 units. Now, how do we calculate here how many animals 1 unit is? That's right, we would take 40 divided by 20 to get 2. So 1 unit is 2 animals. And now, let's see if we can calculate each of the quantities. So we start with the number of chickens. How do we calculate this? That's right, we take 5 units, the number of chickens, multiply by 2 to get 10 chickens. And what about the number of cows? We would take the 3 units and also multiply by 2 to get 6 cows. And lastly, what about the number of goats? Again, we would take in terms of units, so 15 units, and multiply by 2, which would be 30 goats. Now, we are not done yet. Remember, what is the question asking? We need to determine the total number of animal feet. So, let's bring these quantities to the top left of the screen so we have space to calculate the number of feet. Now, how would we calculate the total number of feet? First, we would need to calculate, or rather determine, how many feet each animal has per 1 animal. So, for chicken, how many feet does 1 chicken have? That's right, it would be 2 feet per chicken. What about for cows? How many feet does 1 cow have? A cow has 4 feet. And what about for goats? Also, 4 feet each. Now, how would we calculate now the total number of animal feet? That's right. We would take each of the quantities of the animals and multiply by the number of feet per animal for that particular animal. So, we would get 10 times 2 for the chickens, plus 6 times 4 for the cows, plus 30 times 4 for the goats. And so, how many feet are there in total? There would be 164 feet. Now that we have come to our final answer, let's summarize this question. So, this substitution word problem has a very, very particular characteristic. And what is that? It is a problem with relationship of multiples. So, do you remember the first step we took to solving this kind of question today? That's right, we had to set the number of units for 1 quantity, in this case, the quantity for chickens. And if you remember, we had a very, very particular way of setting this number of units. What was that way? We set the number of units as the opposite number. And just to be very clear, let's consider again this extract from the question. He notices that 3 times the number of his chickens is 5 times the number of his cows. So, how would we express this in an equation? It would be chicken times 3 equals cow times 5. And what would the opposite number be in this case if we are assuming the number of units for chickens? It would be 5 because that is the number on the other side of the equal sign. So, we would assume the number of chickens is 5 units for this question, and that's how we set the number of units for 1 quantity. Thank you for watching today's video. If you have any questions and you would like to contact me, you can scan the QR code on the left to do that. And if you want to join our Primary 4 study group, you can scan the QR code on the right. Thank you again for watching today and see you in the next video.